shops were burnt, ricks were fired, a windmill was broken into, and the machinery sabotaged. Several barns and other buildings were set alight. And there is some evidence of Luddites uprooting hedge stakes as well, possibly for no other reason than they could make good makeshift weapons. But these were all customary ways of demonstrating protest and settling grievances in rural England. All told, there were, I think, around 10 separate instances of arson in and around the knitting villages. Now, what Boosey's friend also suggested, of course, was that these protest acts were often avenging and designed to punish those who were deemed to be exploitative and charge exorbitant prices, such as farmers, millers and corn factors, or they were committed against those such as county magistrates who were thought to be enemies of Luddites. I think the fact that millers, farmers and corn factors are being attacked does suggest that there was an element in Nottinghamshire Luddism, like its northern counterparts, that was concerned with the price of food. Descriptions of Luddites also betrayed the rural dimensions of the movement. In a number of depositions from those who witnessed Luddite attacks or from reports in newspapers, there are references to the rustic clothing of the Luddites, which suggests that they were more akin to village labourers rather than town labourers. Several describe Luddites wearing smock frocks and corduroy trousers, though one witness, I have to acknowledge and be honest with you, implies that this was being done as a deliberate act of disguise. Other sources, however, confirm that the smock frock was commonly worn by the knitters in the villages. Scholars of folklore and rural custom, as we heard from Katrina last night, have pointed out to some of the parallels between the Druidic folk plays with Luddism, especially the ritualised performances and paraphernalia that went with them. Cross-dressing, though I haven't found any instances of that in Nottinghamshire. The use of disguises, lots of those. Blackening of faces, as Alan Howkins showed a number of years ago, another activity associated with those calendric rites and popular festivals in the countryside of yesterday. This aspect of Luddism in Nottinghamshire has not been looked at in any detail. There is certainly evidence to suggest that Luddites were conscious of these traditions. Frame-breaking recommenced at Bulwell on Mischief Night on the 4th of November 1811, a night long associated with popular revelry. But absence was just as revealing here. When Shrove Tuesday came round in February 1812, the authorities were struck by the absence of the usual festivities. Conant and Baker, those two Bow Street runners sent up to Nottinghamshire, write back to the Home Office and say, Shrove Tuesday has long been a custom here when the common people collected together in great numbers and indulged in violent and boisterous sports, especially about the forest. By refusing to participate in these calendric riots, the community was sending a message to the authorities of just how desperate these times were. I'm also struck by the Luddite use of humour. Ludding has invariably been presented as a serious business, and for good reasons. On occasions, though, Luddites could be humorous, deliberately so perhaps, such as when a group of Luddites in Arnold put the remains of one broken frame in the village stocks, or when Luddites at Basford fastened parts of a broken frame to the roof of the local prison and then shot at it. Now, I'm not, of course, wanting to trivialise Luddism by noticing these things, but I think there is a story to be told there. We heard more of it from last night from Katrina about that connection with a rural world. Now, just finally, even more revealing of Luddism's rural contexts was the fact that I found a number of Luddites arrested were also poachers. This framework knitting culture, as I'm beginning to find, was anything but respectable, at least in its totality, and it certainly had a darker, more visceral side to it. This much is evident from, I went through the quarter session records for indictments and convictions of framework knitters in Nottingham in the 10 years, well, not quite preceding Luddism. And there were a total of 40 framework knitters. And you can see that the biggest thing that they're being convicted for is poaching offences. Again, obvious evidence of the rural context in which Luddism is operating here. Assault, riot and theft. This, as I say, is a culture yes, that may well have proud traditions in long in a trade context, but one, as you would expect, given the privations that these guys are suffering from, are resorting to all sorts of covert social protest crime, survival crime, as it's been called. Finally, if I can just say something about the geography of these villages. Sorry, the point I've not really got time to make here that I wanted to suggest was that this idea of Malcolm Thomas's that early Luddites were somehow not criminal, and it was only later ones like James Toll in 1816 who were actually hired frame breakers because frame breaking had become a dangerous affair. Now hardened criminals were being employed. This criminal element was there from the very beginning, as these convictions show. I'm not demeaning the Luddites by saying that, just to say that Luddism emerges out from a background of this rough culture. Now, just a little bit about the geography. You can see a close-up there of a map from 1826. Most of these villages, you won't be surprised to hear, have all very, very recently just been enclosed. An enormous amount of forest land, most of which was wasteland or heathland, where there is evidence of the fact that there were common grazing rights. All of this, the great majority of it, has now been taken away, and massive plantations of trees have been put on these areas where common grazing rights existed, as you would expect at the time of the Napoleonic Wars. There's a premium on wood. But I just want to make a few remarks about these places. First of all, you can tell that we're looking at villages, even 15 or so years after Luddism here, where the density of the housing is so low that you can still see separate dwellings here. And the geography of these places, which Nottinghamshire Luddites know every bit as well as their counterparts in the West Riding, really work this to their advantage. So the thing that connects most of these villages is the river. So rather than using the roads, the Luddites use the river to travel from one village to another. They use gunshots to communicate between, say, Basford and Arnold. We know that attacks in a particular village brought Luddites from a whole number of villages together. Is it a community movement? Well, it seems to me it's more of an intercommunal movement. I think I will probably leave it there. One final story, of course. The Luddites are also using these fields as hiding places. That they're able to, even if you've got a small detachment of troops, so located in one place, they can break frames somewhere else, and then by the time the authorities get there, they've disappeared into the fields, and usually back to the forest. A lot of the attacks are planned on the forest. I'm very sort of interested in Carl Griffin's idea of what forests actually symbolise for popular people, popular culture, and there's certainly lots of evidence of that. Okay, let me conclude. Previous interpretations of Luddism in Nottinghamshire, I think, have shed much light on why Luddism broke out. Both Thomas and Thompson are very good at that in their different ways, but both of them have much less to say about why Luddism assumed the form and geography that it did. For Thomas, echoing William Felkin, hunger and hatred were the causes of Luddism, not Chartism. For E.P. Thompson, it was the final dismantling of the old paternalist framework, the disintegration of the moral economy that explained the timing, and, to be fair, as he saw it, the character. But neither of these interpretations really explain the character of Luddism. I've tried to suggest that Luddism in Nottinghamshire was about more than a mere wage dispute, which is what Thomas suggests it was. Neither was it the sort of latest, albeit most dramatic episode in the evolving history of trades unionism. To understand the character of Nottinghamshire Luddism, it needs situating in the context of rural protest and the strategies of everyday resistance, not radical politics or insurrectionary activity. Machine breaking, then, was part of a well-established pattern of survival crime and what Roger Wells has termed covert social protest, which brought the knitters into conflict, not only with their employers, the hosiers, but also the local elites and magistrates. And I'll leave it there.